You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. But today is a special episode because it's number 300. And being humans of a certain stripe who have 10 fingers and 10 toes, we like big numbers that end in zeros. And so we're going to take a special chance to discuss something different this time, which is the best Star Trek episodes ever. In that, we'll talk about how we came to conclude which ones are best based on our own criteria. But that said, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
Insert comic book guy here. Best episodes ever.
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to stick around to the end of the episode because we also have some great listener feedback that we want to share with you. And I want to encourage you to share the podcast with your friends. Help us grow this community. We've been around for 300 episodes. We plan to be around for a lot more, and we want to keep improving the show, and that improves when we have a bigger audience to interact with. It's always great to have new people listening. And finally, I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network that I'm certain you'll enjoy called Let's Science. It is a science-based podcast, and you can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/science. All right, there's no recap, Jimmy, so you're off the hook this week.
No, I want him to recap all of Star Trek.
You can recap all of Star from 800 some odd episodes.
Space, the final frontier.
That pretty much does it. That's the shortest recap ever. All right, so first I want to ask you all how you came to the decision of how to decide what constitutes the best. And what we're going to do is, I should preface, we're going to choose the best from each series, from the films, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of them now. But Father Cory, how did you make a decision about what constituted the best?
You know, it kind of took both objective and subjective. I think there's kind of both aspects. You know, there's objective, of course, is, episodes that develop the universe, that advance plots, season arcs and things like that, character development, things that were great, writing, directing, acting, things like that, very, objective type elements. But then also subjective things of just episodes I enjoy. My favorite episodes that, if you happen to be flipping through the channels and you see it's on, you're just going to watch, or just something reminds you of that episode and you just have to go sit down and watch it. Yeah. Something like that, something more subjective, something more of just, I like this episode is, really a way to put it, it's a favorite. So like I said, there's a little of both in my picks.
All right. How about you, Jimmy? How did you make your decision?
I decided that the best episodes were the ones I liked. And I don't have channels to flip through, but I do sometimes, at night when I'm winding down and getting ready for bed, I may watch some video. And if I decide to watch Star Trek, the ones that I would tend to rewatch multiple times would be ones that I really enjoy and would recommend to other people. Also, I didn't adhere to this rule strictly, but I basically went over the lists of the episodes of the different shows. And if I remembered an episode from its title and said, oh yeah, I remember that one, that was really good, then I would tend to put that on the list. In a few instances, there was an episode I remember being really good, but I couldn't remember the title and I would look it up. But mostly, it was like, these are the ones that I remember really liking and really liking enough that I remember the title.
Okay. Yeah, for me, it was twofold, similar to you guys, I think. Whichever ones I enjoy the most watching, sometimes ones that may not objectively be great, but they had an impact on me at the time when I watched them. Now I might not say was the best ever, but at the time it had an impact, and it continues to today. So there's that. Also, for some, it was, do they embody Star Trek to me in some unique way? Is there something uniquely Star Trek about it that makes it stand out? And so there was that as well.
I always get really nervous when people start talking about, does this embody Star Trek or not?
Well, it's a subjective idea, which is does this have qualities in it that that I love about Star Trek. Like, is this embody those qualities that make, there are plenty of episodes of Star Trek, often in Discovery, for example, whereas like, this isn't Star Trek, this is something else. And it just doesn't work for me as a Star Trek episode, a Star Trek story.
I think that, see, this is one of the reasons I get uncomfortable with that kind of analysis, is because a lot of people will say, oh, well, Star Trek is about overcoming our differences and da-da-da-da-da. And they can point to things like that in Discovery and say, this is Star Trek. And to me, rather than say, is this Star Trek, I would say it's all Star Trek. It's just some of it's bad.
Right. Well, the good thing here is this is my methodology.
But this is your methodology, so you do you.
And by the way, that's why I went a little more specific about developing the universe and character development and stuff like that. Sure. You know,
right. And I'm also not going to be one like everyone's saying "Kumbaya" at the end, and that embodies Star Trek for me. So that's you can be sure I'm not going to.
Is it really Star Trek if it doesn't have the joke at the end?
Right. If they're not standing around consoles. I did find it difficult. In fact, we'll go into detail as we get to each round, but I did find it difficult to pick favorites in certain series, I have to admit.
Same here.
That they were just, even series that I enjoyed, it was hard for some of them for me to find one that stood out. And so I'm going to, and sometimes in my memory, there was that. So we'll get to that. So as I said, we're going to do round robin style. We're going to have each round will be a different series, starting at the first, and we'll alternating the order in which we talk about them. And so the first series up is, of course, the original series, or Those Old Scientists. And I had the privilege of random number generator choosing me, so I get to pick. So.
Oh yeah,
rigged.
Yeah. No. and the weird thing is every round I came up for it. No, I'm just kidding. Now, I'm going to snipe this one, I'm sure, because it always comes out on the list of the best. But for me, City on the Edge of Forever really stands out. It is a very sci-fi premise. It's really well written. The acting is really great in it. There's an interesting moral quandary that Kirk has to encounter, which is a very sci-fi time travel quandary. And there's a heroic sacrifice that he makes, but also, let's be honest, Edith makes the biggest sacrifice of all in all this. And so, I really love City on the Edge of Forever, and it has resonances. The Guardian of Forever shows up time and time again. In later Trek series, including some more recent ones.
Well, twice.
So just the twice?
Yeah, I'm thinking, twice.
I'm thinking it shows up in novels a number of times. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Yep.
And it's kind of a missed opportunity because at the end of City on the Edge of Forever, the Guardian says, I can do this for you a bunch. And then they never follow up on that.
Right. So that's mine, and I'll quickly turn it over to next up is Jimmy. What is your original series favorite?
Oh, I didn't realize we were limited to one episode per series.
I'm going to pick one at a time, but you can, you go whatever the best episodes are for you. I chose one above all.
Okay. So for the original series, I have a few. Balance of Terror. The original Romulan episode, where it's essentially submarine warfare in space, that's really good. Devil in the Dark, where we get the Horta, the silicon-based life form, that's really good. City on the Edge of Forever, which you've already covered. Amok Time, where we learn about Vulcan marriage rituals and mating. Mirror Mirror, the original Mirror Universe episode. Journey to Babel, where we get to meet Spock's parents. And The Trouble with Tribbles.
Yep. All good. Amok Time was going to be my second choice if I wasn't first. I love that it gives us the Spock-Kirk friendship. It gives McCoy being very clever and underhanded and devious, and gives us Vulcan, like lots about Vulcan, which was always fascinating to me as a kid. And Kroika, which is the I use it on my kids all the time. I use it on my kids. How about you, Father Cory? What's your best episodes of original series?
So for most of these, I picked two or three. Most series, I picked two or three. My first one was The Ultimate Computer. You know, we meet Daystrom, the M5 computer. Now, I should actually caveat first with TOS, as I've said before, I have not seen all of TOS. I'm still working through it, kind of as we do it as with the podcast. But there are some episodes I have seen kind of throughout the years, and Ultimate Computer is one of them. And it's an episode that I think is even more current today than it was in the 60s when it was written, because of the rise of AI and the questions of AI taking over things like jobs, taking over things like control, self-driving vehicles and stuff like that. Of course, this takes that to the extreme of, this isn't just a self-driving vehicle. This is a fully armed battle station, the Enterprise. Sorry, right. Wrong series, but
fully armed and fully operational battle station.
Exactly. But it's the questions of can an AI do things like run spaceships and run military and stuff like that. So it's a really and also the question of the dignity of humanity as well. Versus again artificial intelligence. Episode absolutely love and enjoy. Space Seed. The original Khan. When Khan comes into the world, or gets introduced, that then gets played out in the films,
I should have named that. Yeah.
It's just another great episode, and Ricardo Montalban, and in his great acting and everything. And then like I said, in part of my choosing best is what develops the universe, and we can't forget the original The Cage, the original pilot. Because it really, even though that was not the actual pilot that was aired, there was so much, of course, that came out of that pilot that then set the stage for
including a whole
the rest of
new series like Strange New Worlds. Yeah, that's
exactly.
True. That's true. That's good. That's a good selections there. And that's the thing about the original series. There's a lot to choose from. It was one of the shortest, not the shortest, but it was one of the shortest. But the quality was there, in so many episodes. That won't be true of some of the later ones.
As the character Fry says in Futurama, when he meets the William Shatner head, it's like, aren't you William Shatner, that guy who did Star Trek 78 episodes, about a third of them good? Shatner says,
yeah. I'd say even more than a third great, maybe a third more that were good. So speaking of short series, I put the animated series in here. And I don't know if you guys chose one. Okay, because I felt like it deserved it, even though it was very short. And Father Cory, you get to go first in the animated series round.
Well, actually, so for this one again, haven't watched all the way through TAS as well. But first one I picked was Yesteryear. Speaking of both the Guardian on the Edge of Forever, the Guardian and the Vulcan, because of course that combines talking about Spock's background, his childhood and so on. And so that was that's a great episode, and seeing the time change and all that. And then the Slaver Weapon, Larry Niven's contribution, where he brought the Kazinti in. Of course, Larry Niven is known for much other sci-fi, on his own and with Jerry Pournelle, but of course this is his contribution to the Star Trek universe.
That's awesome. And I was second on the list, and you picked the two that I picked, which was Yesteryear and the Slaver Weapon. I love the fact that Larry Niven brought his pre-existing race, the Zinti, and adapted a story he'd already written to become a Star Trek story. So I thought that was fascinating,
and did it well. And we should say, he did it well. It's a good story.
In fact, I always thought it's been a lost opportunity that the Zinti. I don't think the Kazinti ever. Kazinti is another right. The Kazinti ever show up again in Star Trek? They should certainly.
They do in Lower Decks. Lower Decks.
Lower Decks. There you go. Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah, that's right. They do. And so, but those were the two that really stood out for me as well. How about you, Jimmy?
Well, I was third on the list, and I picked Yesteryear and the Slaver Weapon.
So clearly,
consensus.
Yeah, there's a consensus on the best from the animated series.
Yeah.
There's only a couple dozen to choose from.
I've also read the original story that the Slaver Weapon is based on multiple times, and actually Niven, with his co-author Eric Lerner, has also told it the same story from another perspective. So there's actually three versions of it. There's the initial version of it which is, Niven has his 3 human characters who are trapped by the Kzinti.
Mhm.
And one of them, Nessus the puppeteer, is a familiar character. And then he's got these 2 human sidekicks that he's hired. One of whom is they're like husband and wife, and the husband is military and knows how to use weapons and stuff. And the Kzinti, being carnivores and honor-based, are like, even the Kzinti don't want to ask their telepath to read the mind of Nessus, that pacifist plant eater. And then there's another version in the Fleet of Worlds novels where we get inside Nessus's head and we watch the whole story from just Nessus's perspective.
Oh, fun.
Which is fascinating. And then there's the TAS version where Niven found equivalents in the main cast of Star Trek for his characters. So he's got a woman, he's got Uhura, he's got, they're not married, but Sulu, a weapons expert, corresponding to the military man, and Spock, the pacifist vegetarian.
Yep.
Interesting. So that brings us to our next round, which is the films. I put the films here. This is how we usually, the order we do the podcast in. And so the films, and Jimmy, you get to go first for your choice of best film.
All of the even ones less than 10. So Wrath of Khan, Search for Whales, Undiscovered Country, and First Contact.
I'm second on this, and I put, of course, Wrath of Khan first. I mean, just it is.
Oh, I would actually put Undiscovered Country first. But
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. It seems to be consensus among a lot of fans, and obviously not unanimous, that Wrath of Khan is the best. It's certainly one of the best, one of the top 3 anyway. I really love that one, again, because of a lot to do with Ricardo Montalban. I mean, just he's a great scene-chewing villain in this. He's so great. Then the sacrifices that get made with Spock and others. So then from there, we get, I think, The Voyage Home is my second. It's a nostalgic pick. I always loved that when it first came out. It was funny. It was endearing. I get there's a bit of a message in it, there's a bit of an environmental message, but it wasn't overwhelming. And just, there were so many good moments from that one, including the bus scene.
That's Search for Whales. Yeah.
Yes.
The Search for Whales. How about you, Father Cory?
So my first one's Khan as well. For second one is First Contact. Star Trek First Contact. I enjoy that one. And
it's because it's in Montana, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Bozeman. But I think it could be very easily argued that's the best of the next gen movies. And then The Search for Whales third.
Okay, very good. All right, that brings us to TNG, and actually, I said we didn't do the same order, the same first person every time, but actually, Jimmy, you get to go first again for TNG. So, what's your TNG picks?
So I have a number. The first one is, which I think is really the capstone of the series, is the second season finale. It's called Shades of Grey, and it is the one where Riker gets injured, and they have to stimulate his brain while he's in sickbay. So they stimulate his memory centers, and we get to watch all of our favorite moments from previous episodes. And it's just so meaningful to revisit those fond memories from the first 2 seasons of Star Trek and how great they were.
Okay, there's a phrase in the military I'm going to use. There's a phrase in the military right now that I'm going to simplify. I'm going to make it more G. Save your watch because the crap's getting deep.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Shades of Grey is one of the worst episodes of the entire series. My actual favorite picks are Yesterday's Enterprise, which is a great story that redeems Tasha Yar's death.
Yep.
Hollow Pursuits, where we introduce Barclay and learn about holodeck addiction, which would be an enormous problem in their society. Best of Both Worlds Parts 1 and 2, which is worthy of being an actual movie and would be one of the better movies.
Yeah.
Clues, which is one where the Enterprise crew encounters what seems to be a wormhole, and then they begin to pick up clues that it wasn't a wormhole, that they're all missing a day. And the only person who seems to know about the situation is Data, and he won't tell them what happened in the missing day. That's a really good one. The Drumhead, where we have a witch trial basically conducted on the Enterprise with a visiting judge, Nora Settee, if I recall her name correctly. Darmok. No one can forget, the Children of Tama episode.
Yeah.
Iborg, where we meet Hugh the Borg. The First Duty, where we get our first look at Starfleet Academy, and it's a very tense story involving Wesley needing to tell the truth after participating in an illegal flight maneuver that took the life of a fellow cadet. And we get Nick Locarno, who we'll see again. Even though he looks strangely like Tom Paris, but not everybody agrees. The Next Phase, which is one where Rolaren and Geordi have been rendered insubstantial so that they pass. No one can see or hear them. At first, they think, at least Ro thinks they're dead because they can walk through objects. And there's a mystery to why are they out of phase with normal matter, and we have to deal with that.
But they don't fall through the floors.
They don't fall through the floors, so they're not immune to gravitons, apparently. Or something. They can also breathe. But so who knows how that works. The episode Remember Me, which is another one. I really like these Twilight Zone episodes of Next Gen. I think they're among the best. Next Phase is like that. Clues is like that. They have this mystery element. And Remember Me does. In this one, Beverly Crusher welcomes her friend Dr. Dalen Quace onto the Enterprise. He vanishes, and no one remembers him coming on board. And then other people start vanishing, and no one ever remembers them being there until it's down to just Beverly and Picard, and Picard doesn't remember the ship ever having any other crew.
Of course the ship only has 2 people on it. Why would it need more than 2?
Yeah. Schisms, which is kind of a 24th century alien abduction episode. It's another mystery. People on board the Enterprise are having sleep disturbances and paranoia and unexplained physical injuries, and they start to find out they're being abducted by aliens from subspace.
Yes.
Really interesting one. Dark Page, the best Loxana Troy episode of Next Gen, where we learn that before she had Deanna, she had another daughter who died, and we get a really serious look at the trauma that Loxana went through. Parallels, an episode where Worf is coming back from a Batleth tournament.
Oh, right.
And he starts hopping between universes, and we get to see the different universes and how things have played out in them. And finally, a 7th season episode that not everybody likes, Masks, where the Enterprise encounters an alien probe that begins recreating elements of the Builder's mythology on the Enterprise, particularly focusing on Mr. Data. And I understand, not everybody likes this, but I have heavy anthropological leanings. I appreciate studies of mythology and how it works, and getting to explore this alien mythology, with like the sun chasing the moon and stuff like that, personified as deities. It's all fascinating. And from an anthropological perspective, I really love exploring this imaginary alien mythology.
All right. Excellent. That is a great list. Father Cory, what's your choice for this TNG?
Well, I've, just to repeat one that Jimmy said, I've long said that Yesterday's Enterprise is one of my absolute favorite TNG episodes, if not my favorite, my top. Relics, Captain Montgomery Scott returning. Excellent episode. Yeah. That's just such, so many great scenes, but also, him coming to realization he's, a whole century ahead of where he was before, and getting into that time, and that we shouldn't forget the past and the lessons of the past. And then one that it starts out with a very implausible premise, but it's a great episode, is Chain of Command, where you've got Beverly and Picard going and doing, special ops
and
top
Worf.
secret, and Worf.
Yeah.
Worf is the only one that's plausible of the three that would actually be on this.
Yeah.
And, of course, Picard getting captured and the torture and all that scene and all that. You've got Jellicoe, who, by the way, is a great captain. He just isn't Picard. He gets a bad rap and, played admirably. It's a great episode. It is a great two-parter. And it is, like I said, that just those scenes with the tortures are so powerful. That there were four lights, that line that is repeated,
Yep. Kinsey as captain is really interesting. Oh, I mean, Jellicoe as captain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Yeah.
It's the same character. So I'm going to choose mine. And my first one I know is controversial. I know it is despised by some, but I'm going to choose it because this is what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about my methodology. The Inner Light. I know some people don't like it, but when I first saw it, it felt profound and haunting. And again, I was young. Yep. I was, in my late teens. Imagining what it would have been like to experience a whole life and all those relationships and have them to feel real and then have them stripped away. And it just wow, at the end of it, I remember sitting there thinking about how would Picard have felt after that. And it was fascinating to me to that. And so it really stuck with me and still sticks with me today is that story. So I really like that story. Lower Decks, the TNG episode Lower Decks, and how it felt in the beginning of that story, it was very light. It was like, hey, let's look at some other people on board the ship. But it got very deep by the end, that dark and that sacrifice. And, hey, when these red shirts die, we like to make fun of it, but in that universe, they're real people with real people who love them. And there's a loss is felt. So, and of course, then it inspired one of my favorite Trek series. So, so I'll choose that one. And then I will say, I will agree, The Best of Both Worlds, parts 1 and 2, fantastic. Introduced some very interesting characters: Jellicoe, Shelby, all of those ships. Because I'm a ship geek.
It's not Jellicoe in that one, but Shelby is there.
Yeah, isn't
it's a different admiral. Oh,
okay. Yes, I'm sorry. And then for Shelby and all the ships and the action sequences that were all part of that. It was just a great, like you said, Jimmy, that could have been a motion picture. It would have been a great one. So
if I could interact briefly with your choices, I agree. Lower Decks is really good. I almost put it on my list. With Inner Light, I agree with you. The first time I saw it, I thought it was moving and profound. So I definitely understand that. In attempts to rewatch it, though, I find it's dry and depressing and boring. And so I think that it has first watch value that is really high, but I don't think, for me, it doesn't have rewatch value that's really high.
I could see that. Yeah.
I thought about Inner Light as well. And for me, it's a episode that's important for Picard's character.
Yeah. I'm glad they did it. It's a good episode. It informs his later character with his flute and everything. Glad they did it. Just don't want to watch it a lot.
Well, he's more sympathetic and more empathetic as a character.
Yeah, much more so than earlier. Yeah, that's true.
And so it really was. It's a good episode in that aspect. But yeah, it's not a really watchable episode. It's one of those episodes that, like, when we're talking about it, we'll say something like, well, this is definitely advances the storyline, but that's about all you can say about it.
Once you know what's going on, you've seen it once you understand what has happened, then it doesn't carry the same weight. I agree with that. It does not have high rewatchability, but I think as far as contributing to all of Star Trek TNG, for me, it's up there. All right. We are moving on to the DS9 round, and I have the privilege of going first, and I'm going to say, of course, In the Pale Moonlight is the best, and it may be the best overall Star Trek episode ever. I don't know. It would be hard pressed to say that, just because of the moral struggles of Sisko in that one. But I'm also going to say the Siege of AR-558, which was probably the best war episode, although the Strange New Worlds episode of this past season I forget the name of it.
I actually like the Strange New World ones better than Siege of AR, whatever.
Yeah.
The one where Christine and Dr. Mbenga were on that planet with the Klingon general. That actually may actually surpass it. But I really love Siege of AR 558 and within the context of DS9 certainly. And I also really liked It's Only a Paper Moon, which was a Vic Fontaine episode and had Nog's struggle and really took Nog from being a comic annoyance. You know, he'd already been transforming a bit, but really took him to that next level and made him a real interesting character with some depth. So those would be my picks. Just to interact with yours briefly. So I agree. I'm going to name Only a Paper Moon and In the Pale Moonlight as well. They're both on my list. But I really don't like the Siege of AR, whatever it is. I like the concept of that episode where we're going to be at a ground base in the Dominion War. We're going to see the suffering of the field soldiers. It's not all going to be magical. There's not going to be a magical happy ending at the end. I love the concept. I think it falls flat for me. That's what I like about, or what I like about the equivalent episode in Strange New Worlds is we get to see that. We get and it's wow, okay, it's even amped up from Siege of AR whatever. The battlefield tension. But we also have it's something more that shows us more than just here are a bunch of people suffering in wartime. We have the moral issue that Mbenga is facing with the Klingon general who escaped and killed his own men, and Mbenga knows that and is torn about, can I reveal this or should I not reveal it, or how do I treat this guy? And I think that just elevates the story of the suffering.
No, I agree. And the episode from Strange New Worlds, which by the way is on my list, so we'll have time to talk more about that in a few minutes, is Under the Cloak of War. Yeah. Season 2, Episode 8.
So Father Cory, that I think you are next on the list for DS9. So what are your favorites from DS9? From DS9?
Yeah, DS9, my first one is It's Only a Paper Moon. And just like you said, Dom, it advances Nog's character, but it also shows the effect of PTSD on those who served, on those who fought in war and suffered, were injured in war. So it really shows, how people deal with it. Real life, of course, you see people, they get into drugs and drinking, they get into gambling and so on. In Nog's case,
let's go to Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly kind of what he does. He gets into the business side of it. In the Pale Moonlight, of course, Sisko's willing to betray his principles to get the Romulans into the war, and it works, but he still has that guilt, but he still goes with it. It kind of shows who Sisko is. And then For the Uniform with Michael Eddington, where he's chasing after Michael Eddington. And again, how far is he willing to go to get this guy who betrayed, admittedly, his principles? And yet then later on, Sisko's willing to do it as well. So
interesting.
Yeah, Sisko almost ruins his career in that episode.
Yeah, he does.
Yes. Vic Fontaine is maybe my favorite holodeck character ever. I mean, there's been a lot of them. It's certainly not the bartender from Haven. But it's Vic Fontaine. I just loved Vic Fontaine. It was fantastic. Jimmy, your list for Deep Space Nine.
So, starting with the first season, Duet, where Kira has to tend a guy that she thinks is a Cardassian war hero who becomes a Cardassian war villain, who becomes a tragic figure who's neither a hero nor a villain. It's a fascinating mind game episode with real emotional punch. Whispers. This is an episode that it starts like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Miles O'Brien has come back from a mission, and he starts to detect that everyone around him on the station is treating him with full trust, like he's being shut out of things, and they're not letting him do things he would normally do. And he gradually concludes that it seems like everyone has fallen under some kind of sinister influence, and he even contacts Starfleet to go over their heads, and it seems like Starfleet has fallen under a sinister influence. And we get down to the last 5 minutes of this episode, and you think there's no way they're going to wrap this up, and then they do, and it's brilliant, and I'm not going to spoil it. Also, the Armageddon game. This is a similar one. In a way, O'Brien and Bashir have gone to help two alien groups settle a war by destroying and make peace by destroying their inventory of weapons. And there's biological weapons. And there's an accident, and both O'Brien and Bashir are apparently killed instantly. But Keiko O'Brien can't accept this, and she's watching the videotape of the accident, and she sees a clue that tells her this videotape has been faked. And we have to find out what's really, and she is adamant, my husband would not be drinking coffee at this time of day. This is fake, and we've got to go find him. And they do. And the thing that really puts this, it's a good episode to begin with, but the thing that puts it on my favorite list is, once again, the last 5 minutes, and I will not spoil what happens, but the last 2 lines of this episode are genius. Family Business, where we get to go to Ferenginar and meet Moogie.
Oh, yeah.
Little Green Men, where we go to 1947, and the Ferengi are the explanation of Roswell. The Assignment, which is one where Keiko comes back and is possessed by a paw wraith.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And her portrayal of a possessed person is like the best in science fiction, because she plays it completely the opposite of every other possessed person in the history of science fiction.
Understating instead of overdoing.
Instead of overdoing. I mean, she's just acting normal. It's like, Miles, I'm a paw wraith, I'm possessed, but you're making too big a deal out of this. I mean, and like later she's eating a box of chocolate, and it's like, Miles, you're not really going to let me eat this whole box of chocolates by myself, are you? It
was great.
So just a brilliant subversion of a typical sci-fi trope. Trials and Tribulations, where we get to revisit one of the best episodes of the original series. Impact Nor, where O'Brien and Nog and a few other people and Garak go to the discarded, shut down sister station of Deep Space Nine, which was known as Terok Nor. They go to Impact Nor, so they get to use the Deep Space Nine sets, but everything's dark. The Cardassians are not using it. The gravity is not working exactly right. And they discover a failsafe system that the Cardassians left when they abandoned Impact Nor of basically super soldiers, Cardassians, that they have to deal with. But there's a complication about what makes them super soldiers, and we have to deal with Garak when he becomes infected by the super soldier juice. And he's really struggling to maintain his Federation-influenced morality and failing. And ultimately, Miles O'Brien, and he's mentally torturing Miles O'Brien about, you're the hero of Setlik 3. You're not an engineer. You're a warrior just like me. And Miles ultimately has to prove he's an engineer. And it's really well done. In the cards, on the outbreak of the Dominion War, Jake wants to buy a present for his father, and he wants to get him a baseball card. And this leads to the most amazing adventure wow. Lions and Geigers and bears. Oh my. Yeah. It is an incredibly fun episode with an incredible adventure in the midst of it. Waltz, Sisko and Dukat has been the leader of Cardassia and fallen from power. And he and Sisko are trapped on an asteroid together. And as they're waiting for rescue, they have to interact with each other. Sisko has been injured, apparently, and Dukat is having to take care of him. And it becomes obvious Dukat is not in his right mind. And Sisko has to deal with this crazy person. And it's really well done. Statistical probabilities. This is our introduction to the Jack Pack. They are a group of augmented humans like Dr. Bashir, but who aren't as high functional as Dr. Bashir. And they appear in 2 episodes, and they're both outstanding. They're both on my favorites list. The Jack Pack is great. I just wish they'd brought them back more. The Magnificent Ferengi, where we get the Ferengi going on a Magnificent Seven style mission to Impact Nor to rescue Mugi.
Right.
Inquisition, our introduction to the character Sloane. And the Inquisition is centered.
Section 31.
It introduces Section 31. Yeah. The Inquisition is centered on Dr. Bashir. Yeah. They're raking over everything in his past to see if he's a traitor or not. And what it does is it proves he's not a traitor, so he's a potential recruit for Section 31. In the Pale Moonlight, of course, Treachery, Faith, and the Great River. This one is set during the Dominion War. One of the Wayun clones, the current Wayun clone, has been killed, and he's replaced by one who concludes that the founders are wrong in the war, and he wants to switch sides, and he wants to bring an end to the war by appealing to Odo, who he regards as a god. And so Odo, despite his lack of comfort with the role of a god, has to bring this Wayun back to the Federation, and it's a very moving episode that explores themes of faith. Covenant. In this one, Major Kira is kidnapped by Transporter by a Pa-Wraith cult that is led by Dukat, and we get to see things from the perspective of devotees of the Pa-Wraiths. It's only a paper moon, which is not only great for what it does for Nog's character, it's great for what it does for Vic Fontaine's character, because he's always been a bit player, but here he's a main player, and he gets to develop and he's more active in this. I mean, the character himself says, I've never been turned on for this long. I'm getting to do things I'd never gotten to do before. So because he's caring for Nog as he's got PTSD and he's chosen holodeck therapy as his form of therapy, Vic gets to do things he's never experienced before. And it's great.
Yep.
And he realizes at a certain point, he needs to shut himself off to help Nog. And he makes that sacrifice. It's great as a Vic Fontaine story, not just as a Nog story.
Yep.
Okay. Jimmy, I don't want to cut you off, but we are.
That's okay. I'm gonna abstain from most of the new Trek.
Okay.
Real quick. Field of Fire, murder mystery where Ezri has to tap on her mass murderer Joran predecessor.
That's right.
Inter Arma Anum Silent Legis. Bashir gets a mission from Section 31. And those are my, also the second of the Jack Pack ones, and those are my favorite Deep Space Nines, which is the most, because it's the best series. Of course, I'm going to have the most series there.
Right. I actually was, as you were talking about it, I was thinking about Second Skin also I really liked. That was with when Kira was kidnapped by Cardassians, and they tried to convince her that she's really a Cardassian, Manchurian candidate style spy, and that was fascinating. That was a good one. All right, that brings us to Voyager, and Jimmy, you get to go first with Voyager.
Threshold. There's just nothing like seeing the captain and her helmsman turn into lizards and have space babies.
Yes.
No, they're actually, that's one of the worst.
That's again another savior watch.
Yeah. Going quickly, Tuvix.
Yep.
Great moral dilemma. Tuvix is a very winning character while we have him as a fusion of Tuvox and Neelix. The Thaw. This is the one where they encounter a planet with an artificial intelligence that is running it's meant to be an entertainment system for a dying race, but it's gone wrong. And it's torturing mentally the people that are plugged into it, including the character Fear, who is depicted as an alien clown played by Michael McKean.
Yep.
Right.
And Janeway has to go defeat him. Sacred Ground. Kes is injured on a planet that has religious beliefs, and Janeway has to save Kes by interacting in a respectful way with the religious beliefs of the planet. Worst case scenario, the crew discovers what seems to be a holonovel about a Maquis rebellion on Voyager itself. And turns out it's not a holonovel, and it's got something embedded within it that makes it even more dangerous. Living Witness. The Doctor, or a version of the Doctor, is revived 700 years in the future and must correct the memory of an alien species about Voyager and what it really did and didn't do. Latent Image. The Doctor discovers that he's missing memories, and no one will tell him why. Equinox Parts 1 and 2. What I like about this in particular is the Doctor's ethical subroutines get taken offline, and we get to see an evil version of the Doctor who has no problem with human experimentation. Barge of the Dead. Roseanne Dawson, B'Elanna, goes to Klingon hell.
Right.
This is one of the episodes that was written by Ron Moore during his very brief stint on as a writer for Voyager, and it's Ron Moore. It's better than average Voyager. The Voyager conspiracy. 7 of 9 becomes convinced that there is a conspiracy involving Voyager and that it was not just accidentally transported to the Delta Quadrant. And we've got to deal with her paranoia. Live Fast and Prosper. Con artists impersonate Janeway and Tuvok and are trying to scam people in the Delta Quadrant out of valuable resources and lay the blame on Voyager. And it's fun.
Yeah, that's fun. Good. So let's see, who is next? Oh, I'm next. So I would add two. Those are all good, actually. But I would add, really liked Year of Hell Part 1 and 2, which was an interesting alternative timeline version of Voyager's first time in the Delta Quadrant, which included wonderful guest star Kurtwood Smith, who I kept waiting for to call someone a dumbass at some point, because he famously read on That 70s Show, and he called his son that all the time, or the other characters. But a very interesting premise. I really like that. And The Killing Game Parts 1 and 2, which was the Hirogen as Nazis, and the Voyager crew with memories altered as resistance et al. Defending themselves. A really interesting premise, and the Hirogen were an interesting antagonist race, as opposed to the dumb hair people at the beginning. The
Kazon.
Kazon, thank you. Yeah, the Kazon were like the Ferengi in the sense of they were not scary villains. Let's put it that way.
Just annoying.
Yes. Father Cory, how about you?
So I've got Equinox as well, not just because of the Doctor, but in general, that it's like an anti-Voyager. It's like, what would Voyager have done if Janeway wasn't so insistent on maintaining as best as she would the Starfleet principles? Of course, she was willing to bend those too when necessary, but just not to that level. Year of Hell, especially the original premise of Year of Hell, which was supposed to be a season arc, or at least, major part of the season arc. And, the fact is Voyager isn't pristine throughout much of it and actually gets destroyed at the end. But then, of course, you do the whole time reboot thing, spoiler, and everything's, it's back to, shiny, minty freshness again at the end of the episode. But That's always been a complaint of a lot of Star Trek is they beat the heck out of the ship. Next episode, it looks like it just came out of dry dock. But
Right.
and you didn't see that in Year in Hell. As the year went on, the ship was destroyed. And then the episode I just recently watched that I really enjoyed, Blink of an Eye. This is the planet that was out of phase time-wise.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you see the development of this entire civilization around Voyager effectively, but it ends up being, a couple of weeks on Voyager is all it was. And it was just, very fascinating. And to see this race, develop even beyond where Starfleet is because they wanted to contact Voyager. So that's it's one of those episodes that kind of I forgot about until I watched it again. It's like, oh, this is one of the really good ones.
Okay. That just concludes the Voyager round. Then let's move on to our Enterprise round. And Father Cory, you're up for that. What's your favorites there?
I had a hard time with Enterprise because, let's be honest, most of the episodes are pretty mediocre at best in Enterprise. One I did, actually 2 episodes I liked was the Andorian Incident and Shadows of Pajem. That's where you meet the Andorians and, the Vulcans have the spy thing under the Pajem sanctuary. And then the kind of the consequences of that, the fact that not just did they have this, this incident, but then we saw the consequence of it, that Pajem was destroyed and the Vulcans had to deal with that. I actually kind of like that. And then First Flight, which is we see back when they're test driving the first warp ships, the little Warp 5, basically fighter jets.
Right. That was a cool one. All right. Let's see, on Enterprise, Jimmy, you're next on the Enterprise round.
So at this point, my picks are going to diminish dramatically because Enterprise, as Father Cory said, is mostly mediocre. It did get much better in the 4th season, but I just don't have that many standouts. And I didn't want to pick like the 3 or 4 part story arcs that they did in the 4th season. So, but there is a pair of episodes. Now I could fake out again with A Night in Sickbay, which is one of the worst episodes ever, but I'm not going to do that. There are 2 episodes, it's a 2-parter that I really do like and that I really do have good rewatch value for me. And that's the 4th season pair, In a Mirror Darkly, where we get to see the Mirror Universe. They're set entirely in the Mirror Universe. There are no characters from the main timeline, and so everybody's evil. And it's just fun getting to see the Mirror Universe on its own terms. Even the credits have been altered to reflect the violent militaristic history of the Terran Empire and Starfleet in this brutal version. And In a Mirror Darkly Parts 1 and 2 are a lot of fun.
Yeah, I have that on my list as well, because also it's the prequel. It gives the background to the original Mirror Universe episode, Mirror Mirror, with the original USS Defiant ending up in that universe, and that's their first clue that this exists, and really sets the stage for all the Mirror Universe stuff that comes later.
And the Tholian Web, yeah.
Yep.
Right. And I also added as well The Expanse, which was a third season episode. I think it might have been even like late second, whatever it was. It was
third season was the Expanse story arc, the Xindi Expanse story arc.
Right. There was maybe I meant the Xindi, whichever one it was, where they the first Xindi attack on Earth, where they carved a furrow from Florida to Venezuela or something like that, and because that's the turn. Go ahead.
Right. The Expanse is the final episode of season 2, and that led into the Xindi story arc.
Okay, that's what it was. All right. So because that was the turn. This is when Enterprise got good. So shall we say? I mean, there were good stuff before, but this is when it really was starting to hit its stride. They figured out what the show should be about, and they could have gone for 5 seasons after this, and just the powers that be were too dumb to figure that out. There was a lot of dumbness going around in the early 2000s around sci-fi. Let's put it that way, at the networks. So those were mine. Let's move on to Discovery. That was the next series that came out. I get to go first, and no surprise, my favorite Discovery episodes come from season 2, which gave us Pike and Ensign Mount, and the two that I really stood out for me there were New Eden, which had some really interesting themes surrounding faith and religion and Pike's own faith.
Mhm.
And man, this was hard. It took me forever to choose two here because I wanted to have at least two. Light and Shadows. This was the one where Burnham went back to Vulcan to track down Spock, and we got to learn more about her her life with Spock's family, and so we got more expansion on Spock lore through Burnham's time there. So those are the two I could pick from Discovery. And so who gets the honor? Jimmy, do you have anything that stands out in Discovery for you?
No, I'll make a few exceptions to this, but I largely abstain from New Trek because one of the key things for me is rewatchability. And I haven't lived with these shows long enough to discern which are the ones that I really want to rewatch. However, I can say with a high degree of confidence, very little Discovery has much rewatchability for me.
Yeah.
The few episodes that do, and I don't even bother looking up their names, are the ones where Captain Lorca is revealed and we get the Mirror Universe stuff in season 1. And then season 2 is broadly better than season 1 was. And then season 3, they jump off a cliff.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much anything with Giorgio, too. Yeah, well, anything with Giorgio was great, too, which, again, we lose in season 3. So, how about you, Father Cory?
So my quasi-sarcastic answer is season 4 with all the emotion pulled out of it, all the feelings edited out of it. The whole story arc of the Dark Matter Anomaly was a very interesting story arc. They did some very interesting things with it. We talked about, if you want to hear more about that, you can go listen to Dom and I's season 4 summary episode. And I kind of talk about more, but there was some good things that were done there. But it was so interspersed of, well, let's sit around and, do our USS emotional discovery thing. So that's quasi-sarcastic answer. I personally did not choose a second season episode because that would be too easy with Discovery. But I did pick Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, which was the Harry Mudd time loop episode.
Oh, yeah.
That was a good one, especially watching him kill the crew many times.
Agreed. I'd rewatch that. Yeah.
That one is rewatchable. That one is very rewatchable.
Yeah, and Ray Wilson is great. Yeah.
And then I did pick a third, but it's a short trek, Calypso.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That's rewatchable. That's an enjoyable episode that I am going to call a Discovery episode.
I debated whether to include short treks in this.
Oh, well, then we may as well include them now. And my picks for short treks are Q&A, where we get Spock and number 1 talking on his first day on the Enterprise, and The Trouble with Edward, which is just over the top weird.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was fun.
Funny. There's a lot of good short treks, actually. I mean, there's the animated one with the
animated
robots.
One is also good. Yeah.
And what was the other one that just slipped my mind? But there was another one too that I really thought immediately that one too. All right, so that's quickly through Discovery. Let's move on to Picard. Father Cory,
I had a hard time with Picard. With Picard, and part of the reason I had the hard time with Picard is because they're season stories.
Yeah,
they're not by and large.
They're not standalone stories. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the first one I picked was Imposters, and this is the return of Ro Lauren. This is the Ro Lauren episode where she comes back. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the character of Ro Lauren, and just the way they developed her character, how it looked like she was there to basically attack Picard and Riker, and it turns out she was actually there to protect them and to keep them safe. So that one was a really good one. And then Farewell, which was the last episode of season 2, was another one that I had picked that because it was the conclusion of season 2, and it kind of built on what then they went into with season 3. Okay.
So I'm next, and I would pick, no surprise, I think that my 2 are from season 3, which I think we all agreed was by far and away the best of the Picard seasons. And I choose 2, The Last Generation, which is the final episode, the last episode. It has the TNG crew all together working, on the bridge of the Enterprise D, and it was very nostalgic, but also a lot of action and a lot of promise for what could possibly happen in the future. And then No-Win Scenario, which was earlier that season, that included that scene on the holodeck with Shaw when he rips into Picard, and man, was that peak Shaw. Like, we didn't get a lot of Shaw in this, we unfortunately, but man, he was fantastic in that scene. I really loved that scene, and I was so good. There's, like you said, it was hard to pick, scenes out of Picard because it was one story per season, basically. But those are the ones I picked. Jimmy, did you have anything you wanted to mention in this regard?
No, I think the seasons of Picard get progressively better, and the third season is clearly the best. I also agree that performance as Captain Shaw was awesome. Picard was enough. Picard season 3 was enough. Now, the showrunner was Terry Matalas, and it was strong enough. I decided recently I was going to watch the 4-season series 12 Monkeys based on the movie from the 1990s, because Terry Matalas was the showrunner on that too. And so I've started watching that, and it's quite well done. I'm only in the first season, but it's quite well done. And Captain Shaw is one of the antagonists in that. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of his performances.
And speaking of Shaw, I mentioned Imposters, which was the Rolorn episode. And I love that scene where they're in the holodeck, Captain Shaw and Riker and Picard they're in the holodeck, and he's just gleeful because they're going to meet her, and you're going to get in such trouble, and this is going to be wonderful. And
yes, he had some great moments for him in that season.
Yeah, he's another, like Jellicoe, another awesome captain. That
just
but people appreciate him better.
Yes,
Exactly.
they do. All right, our next round is Lower Decks. Jimmy, do you have anything from Lower Decks you wanted to highlight?
No, they're all really good. That's my problem with this series, is they're all so much fun, and I just haven't had a chance to rewatch them enough to identify favorites yet.
Yep.
All right, so then let's see who got the second there. The Father Cory, what did you did you have anything from Lower Decks?
Yeah, I do have a couple from Lower Decks, and they're mostly development episodes. First one is Something Borrowed, Something Green, where we get to see Orion, and we get kind of development of the Orion race. That was that one. Of course, it's just a fun episode anyways, but we get to, see a lot of that. Parth Ferengi's Heart Place, where Rom and Lita come back. And that was such another, and more development of Ferenginar. We get to see what Rom has done as the Grand Nagus, and again, really enjoyable. And to see appreciation for the Ferengi culture, where it's not mocked anymore, but Freeman is able to actually use the Ferengi culture to get what they wanted, get Ferenginar to come into the Federation. And then Reflections, season 3 episode, and this was the where Rutherford is having the flashbacks. We find out what happened to him, why he ended up with the implant, and how he was involved with Section 31 or something like that, some underground organization within Starfleet. Another really, really, again, kind of actually fairly powerful episode,
which they still need to pay off.
They probably, hopefully, they will next season.
So for me, I picked Old Friends, New Planets, which was the season 4 finale, which was the last episode we saw. Kind of the element of the last thing we saw is the best thing, maybe, but. It just was so much good. The show just keeps getting better. So the most recent episode to me is the best. It's got Nick Locarno. It's got Mariner really coming out of the funk that she was in through most of the season and coming into her own. And Freeman and the rest of the crew really, it was just everything came together in that episode. So I really like that one. And then I have no bones, yet I must flee because. Moopsie. I mean, just Moopsie. What's not to love about Moopsie? So those are mine for that one. So our next round is Prodigy, which to me was the hardest round of all. Father Cory, did you have any for Prodigy?
I do actually have a couple of this. This one was kind of difficult, but there's a couple episodes. Time Amok, this is the split timeline one, where Janeway is like the only. The Hollow Janeway is the only connecting between all the different crew members, and she's able to go back and forth. And help fix the problem. The ship had got split in different timelines. I thought that was actually fairly well done. Again, for such a simple series, this is, such a, Prodigy is a child, not children's, more teens focused, but they did a good job on that one. There's Asylum, which is when they get to the outer edges of the Federation, and the truth of the protostar is revealed that it's actually a bomb or a
Trojan
virus, Trojan horse. We kind of get the development of, okay, now we know why this is such a problem that they're heading to the Federation. And then Supernova, the conclusion of the first season, the 2-part conclusion of the first season, again, kind of developing the storyline and setting the path to go forward into the second season, which will hopefully come out soon.
On Netflix?
Question mark.
Jimmy, did you have anything you wanted to say about Prodigy?
I thought the first season was the best.
Very good. I will choose 2 for Prodigy. I will say that the 2 best for Prodigy, I liked Preludes, which was where we got the background for all of the characters, all of the crew of the Protostar. We got to learn about who they are, where they came from. Not everything, because we still don't know everything about our main character. Murph, that's for sure. That's true. And Dal. We don't get everything we need to know about Dal, but we do get more about Zero and Jan Kumpog and Roktak. So, and then the other one is All the World's a Stage, which was where they encountered the planet of the people who built their civilization around the Starfleet crew. Star Trek, essentially. So that was fun. So those 2 really stood out to me. But again, it's also that problem of it's one big story, so it's hard to choose from among them. All right, so let's move on to our final round, which would be Strange New Worlds. I get to go first in this one, and my pick is Those Old Scientists, the Lower Decks episode, a live action episode. Just so much fun, so funny. I really, there's not much I can add to that. You guys can add more if you want. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is where Kirk and La'an, thank you. All these characters I'm trying to have to come up with all these series. Kirk and La'an end up back in Toronto in sort of present day, and we get a lot more of Kirk in this one, Strange New Worlds Kirk, and he really gets developed. I really like that. And then Charades, which is that funny episode where Spock becomes human and has to pretend to be Vulcan, and I just laughed at that one throughout. So who gets to go next? Father Cory.
So we talked about this one already quite a bit, but it's Under the Cloak of War. Just excellent, showing the consequences of war, showing what it looks like on the front lines, or at least behind the front lines, doing MASH basically. Right. But then also the being willing to forgive, but also, holding consequences to those who cause it. You see again, the Klingon general who's trying to pretend that he's had this conversion of heart and now he wants to be an ambassador and all that. And it turns out that he's just playing the winning side. And, should he have consequences for what he did during the war? Because he did great atrocities and his troops under him did great atrocities. So an excellent episode. We've talked quite a bit about it, so I don't need to go too further in that. The Elysian Kingdom, just a fun episode where it's the storybook. They all become storybook characters. And only, was it the Doctor and was it Lon, or the only, no, was it her? Who was the other one that wasn't affected by it? But anyways, there's two. But there were
two people who weren't affected. Yeah.
But the Doctor was one of them that wasn't affected by it. And it was just fun to see him kind of walk through and try to play through this whole story where everybody's playing these alternate characters. And then a quality of mercy, the final episode of season 1, where Pike meets future Pike if he hadn't gone through the accident, and what were the consequences of that, and Pike having to come to basically resolution on, yes, his future is going to lead to this tragic accident that's going to put him in the wheelchair, but he's still willing to take those steps that will lead to that.
I think it was Hemmer, by the way, who was immune, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Jimmy, do you have anything you wanted to say about Strange New Worlds?
Yeah. So Those Old Scientists, That would probably be my top of all of them. It's just so much fun. I like Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I like, which is the Go Back to Toronto episode. I liked Charades, which is the Spock as a Human episode. I really liked Subspace Rhapsody. Not quite as much as those old scientists, but I really liked it. And I might add Equality of Mercy from the end of season 1 where Himmer dies.
Yes. Yeah. Those were all good choices. All right. So those are what we declare to be the best episodes of Star Trek. And of course, this is our choice. We would love to hear from any of you what your selections would have been, if you would have differed, if you had ones you wanted to suggest. We'd love to hear from you. You can send your picks in to trek@sqpn.com or any of the other places I'll mention at the end of the episode. But I did promise some listener feedback, and I know this is a long episode, but I just want to get to that now.
This is nothing. We're only a little more than an hour. You should listen to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
We're pushing like 3 hours on some of not that many, but no, this is good. So let's get to our first feedback from a recent episode, Progress, the Deep Space Nine episode. Eric sent in an email. He said, "Y'all brought up some very good points about morality and progress, and it got me thinking. I went back tonight and rewatched that episode and paid very close attention to some subtle details. In the daytime scenes, you can hear clearly in the background is full of wildlife. Dozens of bird species, other animals can clearly be heard. At night, there are crickets and insects, as well as other background noise. So this tells me that not only are there people inhabiting this moon, there seems to be an abundance of wildlife as well. Yet no mention is ever made of how they're going to deal with the indigenous species of the moon. The Bajorans only seem concerned about removing the people and apparently didn't care at all about destroying dozens or hundreds or even thousands of other species. Now, it kind of goes against Trek philosophy. I found this interesting because in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, they wanted to make sure that not even a microbe was present on the moon when they tested the Genesis device. Yet here, they don't seem to care at all about the environmental impact on the indigenous species that don't happen to walk around on 2 legs and build huts and pottery kilns in the forest. So what do you think?
Yeah, so number one, this is a problem that you've identified, which is a real issue that only people in the sound department would have noticed when the episode was in production.
Yep.
You're right. The Federation is much stricter about these things, and Bajor is in the Federation.
Mm-hmm.
However, you could say that the moon was basically. This would make absolutely no scientific sense, but you could say all of the planet animal species on the moon were native to Bajor, so they wouldn't die if you wrecked this moon. But that makes no sense at all scientifically.
Yep.
And in the context of Star Trek, since they didn't have the Genesis device as a usable thing for Bajor's moon. So I have to assume that those are native species, and they're willing to kill them to get winter heating for 100,000 humans. Or 100,000 Bajorans. It's like priorities, guys. You're causing multiple extinction events here when you could just get some space heaters from the Federation. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, throw a fusion reactor down there.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to protect the environment if you just completely destroy it altogether.
Right.
Now with the Genesis device, and maybe this was just my headcanon on it, but the reason why they didn't want any microbes is because they didn't want the microbes affecting the results of the recreation of the planet. It wasn't a sense of because they were afraid of destroying life. It was that life would become part of the Genesis matrix and would evolve as we eventually end up seeing when they find Spock's.
That's an interesting interpretation, but I think they do say in Star Trek II that they don't want even the potential for future life.
Right.
No precursors or anything. Yeah.
And I don't know whether that might be why I took it. That might be why I took it where potential for future life, meaning that the Genesis reaction would take these microbes and create future life, which, like I said, we do see in Star Trek 3 because we have those microbes that were on Spock's casket that eventually become the alien with the alien flukes.
Yeah.
I interpreted it as a biological prime directive.
Right.
that
Interesting.
which we already have people talking about. Like there are people like Carl Sagan was one of them who said if it turns out Mars has microbes, we should leave it alone.
Interesting. All right, so our next feedback comes from Cameron, who writes, after hearing about Brian Keith's tragic death by suicide, I went to the Wikipedia page about him, and in the section about his death, I was surprised to read that a friend of his, actress Maureen O'Hara, thought that his death was accidental, as he was probably cleaning his guns collection, and there was an accidental misfire that killed him, because he was in good spirits when she last saw him, and what's more, O'Hara thought that Keith's death must have been accidental because of his Catholic beliefs, which I thought y'all would find cool and interesting. Anyhow, I thought that this is a more positive and alternative interpretation of his death that might help take a bit of the sour note out of the episode when watching it and thinking of him and his death. Because I know Jimmy mentioned this aspect of Keith's tragic death interfered a bit when watching the episode.
I hope you're right. I hope it was just an accident. And it may have been. The factors that are cited here are plausible. The challenge I would have in coming to that same conclusion, I mean, partly I didn't see him, I didn't know him. But the main challenge I would have is I've cleaned guns, and I'm if you're into any degree of gun safety, killing yourself in an accident, cleaning your guns is really
hard.
It's hard to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got to violate major pieces of gun safety protocol to even get injured, much less killed, cleaning a gun.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially when the first rule of gun safety is act as if the gun is always loaded.
Yes.
Right. Also, people who are severely depressed can appear in good spirits right before they take their life. That's not a consistent indicator. So, which is an important factor when you have people in your life who might be depressed, is don't just go off of, they seemed in a good mood today, so that everything's okay. You know, you have to look deeper.
And of course, this is Brian Keith. He's a established actor that he knows how to put on the appearance.
Play a role. Yeah, right. Then on our episode 276, Tomorrow is Yesterday from the original series, Michael writes in, the U.S. Air Force did indeed have air-to-air nuclear weapons during the time period in which Tomorrow is Yesterday is set. The Air-2 Genie, unguided rocket in use from 1957 to 1985, and the AIM-26 Falcon guided missile in use from 1961 to 1972. The Genie was carried by the F-89 Scorpion, the F-101 Voodoo, and the F-106 Delta Dart. It is true that the F-104 Starfighter never carried the Genie, but Spock's concern about nuclear-armed U.S. Air Force interceptors is far more reasonable than you gave it credit for being.
Fair enough.
Okay, that's fair enough.
My thought, though, is one of them was an unguided nuclear rocket.
Well,
okay.
It's basically point and shoot, basically.
But the idea, though, that, oops, we missed, what's going to happen to the nuke that we just launched?
Broken arrow.
Yeah, exactly.
They were much more willing to use nuclear weapons in tactical scenarios than anybody ever thought today to do. Ugh.
Hopefully, at a minimum, it did have at least something where the pilot could send a, self-destruct type signal,
Right. And then all the way back to episode 59, the original series episode Mud's Women, Mark writes on YouTube, Jimmy was talking about proxy weddings in the Old West. They still happen now in the state of Texas. I found out about this years ago when a friend married a man in prison, which is a long story. In fact, 2 astronauts married, with one in space and one in Texas. This is a quote from a news story, I think. A unique space wedding took place on August 10th, 2003, when Ekaterina Dmitriev, an American citizen living in the U.S. state of Texas, where the ceremony was performed, was married by proxy to Yuri Malenchenko, a cosmonaut who was orbiting the Earth in the International Space Station at the time. End quote.
I've never done a survey of where proxy marriages, in what jurisdictions are proxy marriages still legal or still done. It may be a lot of them, I don't know. But you know where else they're done? The Catholic Church.
Yep.
Because the Code of Canon Law has provisions for proxy weddings.
Excellent. Although you have to make sure you get consent ahead of time, and so that poor Yuri up in the space station goes, "I married what?"
Yeah.
Well, you didn't say it, you didn't do it, so
That's right.
And by the way, Montana also has proxy marriages, so including double proxy.
Interesting.
In
so
specific
neither of them
situations.
have to be present.
Yeah, and I would assume most likely this is going to be something like a military where he's stationed at one base in one state. She's based at another base elsewhere in the world. And they're just do it by proxy in Montana because they couldn't leave the same time or something. I don't know.
I forget which one it is, but there's a Bing Crosby Andrews Sisters song where they're singing along, and one of the lines is Bing Crosby singing, "I'm getting married by proxy," and it's like, really? I'd like to know more about that.
So thank you, everyone, for your feedback. We do appreciate getting it. And now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Trek, now at 300 episodes, including Tom and Charlotte D., John M., Michelle S., Ben A., and Sam M. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. We'd love to get your feedback on the best Star Trek episodes ever, which you can do by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. And you can watch The Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Next Generation episode, Booby Trap. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom, and live fast and prosper.
And Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, after a time you may find that having is not so pleasing a thing after all as wanting. It is not logical, but it is often true. That's the best line ever.